Baby-faced social media pioneer Mark Zuckerberg has taken Facebook from his dorm room at Harvard to a worldwide phenomenon.
Here was someone who was a real engineer, who was one of those wizards who stay up late making things that excite them and they believe will change the world.
His creation transformed the web. The site now has over 500 million users.
I think most people still haven't really digested the scale of Facebook or how quickly it's grown.
Mark likes to do things his way. Look how successful it's made Facebook today.
But for all that success, Zuckerberg has confronted bitter battles and lawsuits over Facebook's origins.
One, he wanted to control his own thing. And two, if he's going to go against someone, he's going to crush them.
We spent 3 months working with Mark, being essentially led on. We were all blindsided. We had no idea that he was working on a competing product.
And he has been under fire and challenged for pushing the limits on user privacy.
I want everybody here to be careful about what you post on Facebook.
They have amassed this humongous database of information about us because we trusted them. So the question is, should we still trust them?
Now we want...
This is Mark Zuckerberg from his own Facebook page.
A hoop again, another hoop. There was definitely, I felt a hoop. Yeah.
If you think he looks disarmingly young, you're right. In fact, at 26, Zuckerberg is one of a handful of young billionaires in the world. Though his company remains private, his personal net worth is estimated at $4 billion. For all the attention his company gets, Zuckerberg keeps a low profile and declined to participate in this program.
Super focused, super technical, wildly ambitious young man who was able to see early on how sharing information could be the center of people's lives.
There's a lot of surprises when you really dig deep into the story of Facebook. The biggest single surprise is the peculiar and tenacious personality of Mark Zuckerberg, the depth of his convictions and his consistency.
Born in 1984, Zuckerberg grew up in the Hudson River town of Dobbs Ferry, a bedroom community north of New York City. David Kirkpatrick is author of The Facebook Effect.
He comes from an unbelievably supportive family in which he's the only son, and he has 3 sisters. So he was kind of the prince, and in fact, I think his parents called him the prince. And he was treated accordingly. So this is a guy without any problem of self-confidence.
For Zuckerberg, computer programming came naturally. He taught himself the complicated computer language C++, and by 9th grade had created the digital version of the board game Risk.
When he got sort of tired of his local high school and decided to go to Exeter prep school, really because he just wanted more challenge.
It was at Exeter Academy. Zuckerberg and his friend, Adam D'Angelo, created a music website called Synapse.
It was intended to sort of anticipate what your preferences might be. And it was very, very popular. Even before he started Facebook, he was fending off offers from Microsoft and others to buy Synapse for well over $1 million.
Like a tech world version of an all-star athlete, big-name companies wanted to recruit him right out of Exeter. Zuckerberg was unimpressed and chose instead to enter Harvard in 2002, where it wasn't long before he got himself in trouble. Zuckerberg hacked into the school's computers to collect images of students. Nicholas Carlson is senior editor at BusinessInsider.com.
You can sort of tell that he's a little bit of a troublemaker. He creates something called Face Mash his first year in Harvard, and it's a sort of hot or not for the Harvard community. And then it maintained an entire list of Harvard students and which ones were the most attractive, ranking them by hotness.
Ellen McGirt interviewed Zuckerberg for Fast Company magazine.
Face Mash worked in kind of a little bit of an icky way. It made people upset. Obviously, people felt mocked or exposed, and it was one of the first big experiences that Mark had with the privacy issues of the masses.
Under pressure, Zuckerberg shut down the site. The Harvard Administration Board charged him with breaching security, violating copyrights and violating individual privacy. He got off with a warning, but by then, FaceMash was a campus sensation. Zuckerberg had seen his future.
At the same time of getting trouble for building this sort of like mischievous web tool, he built a mischievous web tool that was really popular.
I imagine that he had a couple of sleepless nights worrying about how bad this thing was going to be, and was relieved when it all blew over, but was also incredibly curious about what he could then make next. If you're a genius with genius friends sitting in a dorm room, suddenly the world looks like a big, happy, open place if you can just get into that database.
At the time, the technology landscape was changing dramatically.
The world was realizing that social networking was going to matter because MySpace had launched and was growing very, very rapidly. The year before, Friendster had been a huge hit, gotten as many as 20 million users.
By the beginning of his sophomore year, Zuckerberg got noticed by 3 upperclassmen building a social networking site called Harvard Connection. Olympic rowers and twins Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss with partner Divya Narendra.
Harvard Connection was an idea that I'd come up with when I was a junior in college. This was at the end of 2002.
The team had been building the site for a year, but after losing 2 of their programmers to graduation, they needed a new partner.
The 3 of us are not computer programmers by trade or practice. We did need an actual programmer to write the actual hard lines of code, and we thought Mark was that guy.
The team reached out to Zuckerberg, who knew a good thing when he saw it.
He was enthused, excited, and clearly his eyes were lighting up.
What happened next sparked a furious battle over how Facebook was actually created. The details unfold in email exchanges between Zuckerberg and the Harvard Connection team. At first, Zuckerberg was enthusiastic.
I read over all the stuff you sent, and it seems like it shouldn't take too long to implement, so we can talk about that after I get all the basic functionality up tomorrow night.
Then, Zuckerberg began to delay the project.
December 10th. The week has been pretty busy thus far, so I haven't gotten a chance to do much work on the site or even think about it, really.
Writer Nicholas Carlson interviewed more than a dozen people involved in the founding of Facebook and uncovered instant messages he said Zuckerberg sent to college friend Eduardo Saverin. The IMs tell a very different story. Zuckerberg was busy building a competing social networking site of his own. He called it the Facebook.
He says things like, "Look at this site that I'm working on, Harvard Connection. Haha, they made a mistake. They asked me to do it for them because I'm working on my own Facebook."
The Winklevoss twins and Narendra weren't paying Zuckerberg anything, but Saverin was. The website Business Insider reported that he gave Zuckerberg $15,000 in exchange for 30% ownership in his new creation. The two became partners. To succeed in this new net culture called social networking, being first was crucial. Zuckerberg continued to stall the Harvard Connection team.
We were always under the impression that Mark was working on HarvardConnection.com. There was never an indication from him that he could not do the work, didn't want to do the work, or was working on something identical on the side called the Facebook.
When he met with the Winklevoss brothers the last time, he saw that he probably should tell them that he's been working on a competing product. He sort of conferred about it with friends. But in the end, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to blank them. I'm going to blank them in the ear.
On February 4th, 2004, just as he was expected to complete work on their site, Zuckerberg instead launched the Facebook. The Winklevoss brothers and Narendra found out about it the same way everyone else at Harvard did.
It completely blindsided us. We definitely did not expect that.
I felt very betrayed when I first heard about the Facebook being launched. I think I've been quoted as saying that we've been royally screwed. I think it's kind of a good way to put it.
Mark wanted to have control over his own project. He saw that they were onto something cool, the Winklevoss brothers, but he saw that he could do something cooler. And so, one, he wanted to control his own thing, and two, if he's going to go against someone, he's going to crush them. And that's what he did.
Days later, on February 10th, the Winklevoss twins and Narendra sent Zuckerberg a cease and desist letter.
In a nutshell, our complaint against Mark Zuckerberg is fraud, unjust enrichment, and breach of contract.
Zuckerberg responded with a letter denying any wrongdoing, claiming his site was a separate venture and used none of the same code. Frustrated and angry, the two brothers and Narendra appealed to then Harvard president Larry Summers.
He said that he felt that this issue was outside of the purview of Harvard and it was really a matter for the courts.
With Harvard unwilling to intervene, by September of that year, it had become a vicious lawsuit. And by then, Zuckerberg wasn't looking back. Facebook was already a huge hit, and he was about to take off for a place he and his friends considered the promised land, Silicon Valley. In 2004 Silicon Valley, the tech boom was making a comeback, and investors were looking for the next big thing. Zuckerberg had dropped out of Harvard. He and his friends had moved to Palo Alto to focus on his explosive new social networking site.
One of the things that Mark did that was very smart by going to Palo Alto was to actually enter the petri dish of entrepreneurialism, particularly for new technologies.
That petri dish included another boy wonder, Sean Parker.
Sean Parker is a key character in the story of Facebook, partly because he had been an entrepreneur twice before. He had co-founded Napster, he had co-founded Plaxo.
Zuckerberg and his co-founder Saverin had dinner with Parker to discuss the future of Facebook.
Sean said, hey, what you've got is a really big deal. Let's make it into something.
When Mark Zuckerberg met him, he was 21, 22. He was the adult supervision. He's the guy who showed them how things are done in Silicon Valley.
Parker gave Zuckerberg some shrewd advice he took to heart.
He sort of looked at him and said, you need to be the founder of this thing, and you need to be the CEO forever. You know, you can't turn this over to investors.
And Mark is able to negotiate a series of increasingly important investment deals that do two things. One, allow him enough operating cash to hire some of the smartest engineers in the business. And two, help him retain majority control in the company.
During this period, Zuckerberg had another mysterious falling out. This time with original investor Eduardo Saverin. After dueling accusations, Zuckerberg froze Saverin out of Facebook. Saverin's name disappeared from the founder's biography page. The rupture between the two former partners would last for years. Sean Parker, meanwhile, introduced Zuckerberg to Silicon Valley angel investor Peter Thiel, who put $500,000 into the company. Parker was named Facebook president. With 1 million active users and growing, big money came pouring in. In the spring of 2005, the venture capital company Accel Partners offered Zuckerberg $12.7 million for an 11% stake in the company.
And didn't ask for much control at all. Walking away from that investment, Mark controlled 3 out of 5 board seats.
Which is a bizarre and unprecedented situation to have one individual have absolute, effectively dictatorial control over the disposition and direction of an increasingly giant company.
In less than a year, Parker was gone. In August of 2005, he was arrested for suspicion of cocaine possession. Although not formally charged with a crime and immediately released, it led to his abrupt resignation as president of Facebook. The firmly in control Zuckerberg then rolled out another Facebook innovation, allowing people to identify or tag themselves and their friends in photographs. It was a simple move that would change the course of his company.
That was a huge, huge change that led to massive new use of Facebook, and photos became very rapidly by far the most used part of Facebook and became the single biggest driver of its growth.
According to Facebook's internal numbers, in less than 2 years, it had grown to 5.5 million users. Media giants soon began banging on the door. In 2006, Yahoo baited the 22-year-old Zuckerberg with an extraordinary offer, a buyout for $1 billion. Even more extraordinary, Zuckerberg turned them down.
Now, if you are a parent of someone about Mark's age, you're looking at the Yahoo decision and thinking, why did you not take that money?
We just felt that doing that and going down that path would not help us build Facebook out to what we thought it could be.
The potential for what Facebook could be would pressure Zuckerberg to take some big risks that would threaten the future of the company. In 2006, Facebook was at the cutting edge of social networking, and its improbable leader, Mark Zuckerberg, was busy fielding offers from major media players. Michael Wolff was CEO of MTV Networks.
He was interested in a partnership. I was interested in acquiring the company. I told him we'd be willing to pay as much as $1.5 billion to buy Facebook outright. His answer was, I think it's worth a lot more, and at the same time, I may never have an idea as good as this one, so I'm not that interested in selling.
In 2006, Zuckerberg believed he could take Facebook to another level. He came up with something called Newsfeed. Users could update their status, and it would be immediately shared with their network of friends. But many users thought the feature was a violation of their privacy. 500,000 of them launched an online protest.
To say that it was unpopular at first is a dramatic understatement. They were under siege at the office. They couldn't leave. They were surrounded by news trucks.
Zuckerberg was wounded. He was forced to apologize.
He wrote his apology note himself. It was probably a good learning experience. When Facebook changed some of the privacy controls, it was an overstep. I do think that he takes those seriously, but I do think that he's willing to continue to overstep for the purpose of making a product that he wants to make.
Not surprisingly to Zuckerberg, Newsfeed was worth saving, and it became one of the most popular elements of the Facebook experience. On the heels of Newsfeed, Zuckerberg expanded beyond its college roots and opened Facebook to the general public. That wider audience was the blast that launched it to a stunning 12 million users, more than double the previous year.
Mark Zuckerberg doesn't ever really get surprised. He is so confident, I think, that he always kind of just assumed he'd have a lot of success.
Success brought more success. And in 2007, industry giant Microsoft enters the picture.
Microsoft knocks on Facebook's door. This is a technology that's not going away, and Microsoft wants a piece of it.
This time, it was a deal Zuckerberg couldn't turn down. And for the first time, the world got a glimpse of what Facebook may really be worth.
By the time people were finally getting used to the idea that anyone would pay $1 billion for Facebook, Microsoft comes along and pays $250 million for 1.6% of the company. It was outrageous. It valued the company at $15 billion. This took Facebook from a thing that a lot of people use to a thing that everyone was talking about, the $15 billion company.
But only a month later, Zuckerberg, at the top of his game, stumbles badly.
Zuckerberg's made a lot of mistakes. The next mistake, which was a really big one, was Beacon.
You go to a third-party e-commerce site and you buy something, and unless you tell it not to, really quickly, it's going to go back and tell all your friends that you just bought a diamond engagement ring. And obviously, you know, that sort of secret revealing can cause a lot of trouble.
There was the great rallying cry that Facebook ruined Christmas because suddenly everyone's purchases were being broadcast to their entire network.
Nevertheless, Zuckerberg was defiant.
Zuckerberg really tried to defend it for a while. It took him a while to realize how wrong it was.
On December 5th, 2007, he made another full-throated apology. 2 months later, in February 2008, after years of legal maneuvering, the lawsuit over Facebook's origins resurfaced. The Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra reached a settlement with Zuckerberg for $65 million for their part in creating Facebook. They later changed their minds.
So we were appealing because we were misled. The settlement that we had initially signed up for contained both cash and stock in the company, but the stock component was essentially overvalued by Facebook.
We will continue pursuing this until we are adequately compensated for the value we added to Facebook.
Mark Zuckerberg considers the matter closed. By 2009, Facebook reached over 150 million people. Rumors swirled that the company would go public, but instead took money from a new investor. Yuri Milner, CEO of the Russian internet investment firm Digital Sky Technologies, proposed a $200 million deal for an almost 2% stake in the company.
Deals of that size are kind of never easy. There's a lot of back and forth. This deal was about the vision that we shared, how big this company can get. Everything else was sort of secondary.
Milner's investment allowed Facebook to delay going public and supported its continuing growth. Advertising was the key to keeping it going, and Facebook was in a unique position.
A lot of previous internet marketing models are based on clicks or impressions. So you get paid to either show this ad or get a click one time. And the notion of connections on Facebook is kind of fundamentally different from that, because once you have a connection, it's a long-term relationship with that person.
Jeremy Smith is Chief Strategy Officer for Second Market and deals with assets like Facebook shares that cannot yet be traded on the public market.
What makes Facebook so desirable from the perspective of advertisers is that they are able to accumulate information on their users like nobody else. And the funny thing is, the users don't really view it as data. It's themselves, it's their information, it's their lives that they're putting on there. But as far as advertisers are concerned, it is the holy grail of data.
Facebook denied newspaper reports that it would be selling user data to advertisers, rumors that raised concerns across its network. Mark Rash is former head of the United States Department of Justice Computer Crime Unit and is now a computer security consultant.
It doesn't trouble me that people buy information. This is what Google's business model is. It's what Twitter's business model is going to be, provided that individuals know what they're giving up. You know, you get a free service, Facebook, you don't write them a check every month, but in return for which, they get your personal information. The problem is when you are getting the service for free but don't know what you're giving up and give up more than you want to.
Mark gets in trouble over privacy a lot, and he continues to do it despite several backlashes, for one very simple reason. Despite all these backlashes amongst the media and small subsets of very vocal users, people keep joining Facebook in throngs. People don't quit Facebook over these issues.
In July of 2010, Facebook hit 500 million users, making it the world's most popular website. 2 months later, Zuckerberg made a surprise appearance on Oprah to announce a $100 million donation to public schools in Newark, New Jersey, and the creation of the Startup Education Foundation. The origin of Facebook is now the subject of a major motion picture, The Social Network.
You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things that no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing.
For a site that's able to move from the dorm room to a site where, you know, my 80-year-old mother and myself and my chiropractor and my third grade class all reunites on the site, and we all have something to talk about, and we choose what we need to talk about, whether it's about somebody's birthday or politics or whatever it is, it's an achievement.
He's growing as a person with 1,400 employees, you know, close to 500 million users. He's changing in a lot of ways. He's becoming a more natural leader. He's becoming more confident of his skills. He's more than a little bit of a rebel. He is like the modern James Dean, this guy. He is an amazingly impactful person who cares not what other people think about him and wants to change the world.